Today is day 18 of Israel's Operation Protective Edge. And while the rest of the world watches in horror, Israel has only seemed more emboldened to continue crushing the Gaza Strip, all in the name of self-defense. Now, a 12-hour ceasefire has been announced, hopefully alleviating the bloodshed temporarily. However, yesterday, 5 people died in the West Bank, which saw its largest demonstration against Israel since the 1980s. And in Gaza, at least 817 Palestinians are dead, according to the Wall Street Journal at the time of this broadcast. 80% of the casualties are civilians, including nearly 200 children. At least 5,300 people have been injured, according to the International Middle East Media Center, as Gaza's hospitals struggle to meet the increasing demand for medical care. And considering how the U.S. provides more than $3 billion in aid to Israel annually, many are calling on Obama to use his sway to end the violence. In fact, a Norwegian doctor volunteering throughout the crisis wrote an open letter inviting Obama to spend the night in a Gaza hospital, saying, quote, "Just now, the orchestra of the Israeli war machine starts its gruesome symphony again. Salvos of artillery from the Navy boats just down on the shores, the roaring F-16s, the sickening drones, and the cluttering Apaches. So much made and paid in by the U.S. I invite you, spend one night, just one night with us in Shifa. I'm convinced 100% it would change history. Nobody with a heart and power could ever walk away from a night here without being determined to end the slaughter of the Palestinian people." Well, after such a tragic 2 weeks on the ground, many are left wondering what they can do to help. To discuss solutions and more, I'm joined by Rania, Khalek, journalist with the Electronic Intifada. Thank you so much for coming on, Rania. I get most of my information from you. You've been tweeting up a storm, one of the best people covering this entire conflict. You interviewed Norwegian Dr. Mads Gilbert, who wrote that open letter to Obama that I just referenced. Who is this guy? Why is he in Gaza? And what were the most important points that he addressed to you?
So Mads Gilbert is a physician who has been in Gaza every single time it's been attacked for the past like 6 years. Each time he's been, he's seen, the same horrors over and over again. And I've spoken to him, like you said, repeatedly. And each time he's updated me, it seems like the toll is getting worse, the injuries are getting worse. And what he keeps telling me is that it's civilians and children and women and parents and families that are coming in with their bodies just torn to shreds by Israeli, high-level military technology that's being used on, and he put it to me, it's being used on a naked civilian population, is the way he put it. And also, the hospitals are stressed. They already were suffering from, severe, dire shortages before this latest assault because of the siege on Gaza, which basically seals it, and Israel doesn't allow a lot to go in. And so now they're even more stressed. They've got injuries that trauma 1 centers in the U.S. would have trouble dealing with, and so you have a really, really difficult situation taking place on the ground there.
Absolutely, and I know that he mentioned that the deliberate targeting of hospitals as well. Right before this broadcast, I announced that there was this ceasefire, I guess, for 12 hours, this pause. However, we were just talking right before this started that there was reports of actually continuous shelling on a bunch of places, including hospitals, still, even with this pause. Can we expect really anything with these pauses, Rania?
I'm not sure. There's been a few pauses so far, like I think 2 maybe, where there was, supposed to be a 5-hour pause or a 2-hour pause here to, humanitarian pause to collect the wounded. And each time Israel has continued to shell. And yeah, shelling hospitals has been a big deal. There's been at least 25, and at this point more, because there's more reports of another hospital being shelled, but at least 25 medical facilities have been hit by Israel throughout this onslaught, and several ambulance workers, paramedics have been hit as well. And this is routine and it's deliberate. It's not by accident. That's why 80% of the over 850 people that have been killed have been civilians.
I want to get your take on something that I found interesting. Of course, Obama and the media have been repeating often that all of this is justified by the continuous Hamas rockets going into Israel. However, why was Netanyahu so upset that the airport was closed in Tel Aviv? If there are so many rockets disrupting Israel, why not close down the airport?
Well, I think the point is that there's not, rockets are a nuisance, but it's not this threat that Israel likes to make it out to be, where the country's going to cease to exist because of these rockets. And I think the reason he was so upset about the airport situation is because that hits Israel economically, which is a problem. So it's like they want this, he wants both sides of it. He wants to be the victim while at the same time being like, no, it's totally safe. But I think that goes back to the fact that this isn't about tunnels and rockets. This is about this continuous collective punishment on Gaza that's meted out every couple of years intensely the way it is now, but in between it's meted out with the siege. And it goes back to trying to crush what resistance exists against Israel's colonial enterprise.
Why is this type of continuous violence intrinsic in the way Israel has been formed and the way it continues to operate?
Well, the people of Gaza, there's 1.8 million people that are basically trapped in what's a ghetto. 80% of them are refugees that were kicked out of Israel because they are the wrong ethnicity. And that's the case with all Palestinians that are outside Israel. They were kicked out. They were ethnically cleansed. And Israel, in order to maintain its demographic majority demographically engineered majority Jewish population, it has to consistently launch this sort of violence against Palestinians, whether it's in the West Bank, where 8 people have been killed in the past 2 days or 3 days for protesting against the Gaza war, or in Gaza, where it's the most intense version, the most extreme version of what it takes to maintain this Jewish colonial state in an area where the inhabitants are not majority Jewish.
It is extreme, and I think that's a really accurate way to describe this, because when you're looking at the massacre, it's so one-sided, it's almost absurd that you continue to see this Hasbara in the face of so much bloodshed. And I guess I wanted to get your response to these kind of talking points, the human shield talking point and also the Hamas charter that says, and I don't actually know because I don't read Arabic, but the translation says that Israel should cease to exist.
Well, okay, so the first point with the human shield, this is something that Israel consistently says, and I think you pointed it out on your show a couple nights ago, where the only evidence Israel provides is these cartoon sketches. So you've got this accusation being made that I think is a very racist accusation to suggest that Arabs, Palestinians and Arabs like to use their children as shields. This is something that the U.S. used to say during Iraq as well.
Exactly, the mythologizing that term. Yeah.
Exactly, and so, but the point is that there is no proof that Hamas is using human shields, and one journalist after another has said, I haven't seen it happen. I've gone on ambulances. I haven't seen Hamas using ambulances to store weapons. In fact, the only documented cases, actually systematic cases that have been documented by human rights organizations, is Israel using Palestinians as human shields by putting them on the hoods of cars, or forcing them to go into homes to make sure there's no explosives. They've done this in Gaza. They've done it in the West Bank. So it's almost like projection to be accusing Palestinians of using each other as shields. And to the second point, this is something that people like to bring up is, oh, Hamas wants to destroy Israel. But I would point out that the only side that's being destroyed here is Palestine. And it's been being destroyed since 1948. And right now it's being destroyed as we speak in a very vicious and violent and bloody way. And so I think it's more important to focus on which side has the capacity to destroy the other side and is actively doing so. And that's Israel.
That's a good point. Let's talk about solutions, Rania. Boycott, divestment, sanctions. You're an advocate of the BDS movement. Why?
Well, because it's a call that comes from Palestinian civil society, asking people of conscience around the world to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel until it dismantles apartheid, until it gives equal rights to Palestinians. And so that's why I think it's important. You have it coming from the people who are suffering. And so I think it's really important to, if we care about, ending that oppression, ending that suffering, to honor that call. And also, as a tactic, I think it's very effective because we have Israel is a country that's supported by, most Western governments support Israel hardcore. And it's very, very difficult to get change from the top. And so this is a way that grassroots, it's a bottom to the top kind of movement where people on the grassroots can really, affect change. And I think if we look at, the South African model, of dismantling apartheid, divestment played such a huge role in doing that. I think we can see the same thing happen with Israel, I hope. And we're seeing it happen. I mean, we're seeing on campuses, from one campus to the next, student governments divesting their funds from companies that profit off of Israeli occupation. And it may seem minor because it's not that much money, but it does a lot of damage to Israel's image, because it brings, kind of out in the open, it exposes this racist regime for what it is.
Absolutely, and I think musicians deciding not to play there, all of these things coming together is how we're going to change this, Rania. And of course, unfortunately, in this country, the way Hamas is designated, even though they are democratically elected leadership of that territory, we cannot donate to Palestinians on the ground because we would be perhaps indicted as funding terrorists. And I just wanted to give a little website out, the Islamic Relief USA, irusa.org, for people who want to help out on the ground. That's probably the best organization that you can do without being, accused of supporting terrorism. Unfortunately, that's the situation we're in. Thank you so much, Rania Khalek, journalist with the Electronic Intifada. Really appreciate your insight.